Man, am I ready to talk about this game. There's really nothing I can say about it that hasn't already been said, but this is the Naughty Dog reviews, so it looks like I'm gonna have to anyways. The Last of Us came out in 2013, around the end of the PS3's life cycle, but unfortunately I wasn't able to play this game until around 2015 because when I bought it for my PS3, I got about 2 hours into the game before my console broke down with the infamous yellow light of death. I was upset to say the least, but luckily the game was remastered for PS4 in 2014, so I was able to play it a couple years later, and boy was it deserving of the praise it was getting. The Last of Us is, in my opinion, about as close to perfection as a game can get. Let's start off with the main selling point of this game, the world building and story. Naughty Dog had already proved they were capable of making a compelling story with games like Jak 2 and the Uncharted series, but this took it to a whole new level. The world of The Last of Us is one of the darkest and most realistic worlds I've ever seen in a video game, or any form of entertainment for that matter. The world has been infested by a fungus known as Cordyceps, which, for those of you who don't know, is a real fungus that exists in our world. It takes over the mind of small creatures such as ants and manipulates them into searching for other ants so it can spread among them. In the world of The Last of Us, the fungus has found its way into humans, which gives them nothing but the desire to spread it to other humans. This makes the world feel incredibly grounded in reality, making you question whether or not this could actually happen in real life. While the infected in this game are scary, especially the clickers, the humans that remain are what's truly terrifying. There's still some form of authority within sections known as quarantine zones, but outside of that lies the real horrors like the hunters, who have turned to cannibalism to survive, and will gun someone down for nothing more than to loot their pockets. In this game you play as Joel, a man who lost his daughter at the start of this new world, which is also the prologue to the game. We then start the main chunk of the game, which starts 20 years later. Joel is now merely a shadow of the man he once was, and while we weren't shown what happened within the 20-year time jump, the game does hint at things that tell us Joel has done some pretty horrible things to survive.
How did you know?
Know what?
About the ambush.
I've been on both sides.
I'll take that as a yes.
Take it however you want.
There are no heroes in this game, which only makes this world even more disturbingly realistic. All of the characters in this game are unbelievably human. There's Bill, who has cut off all emotional attachment to anyone and focuses his life on nothing more than survival. Then there's Tommy, which is Joel's brother, who has found a way to build a community even in a world like this. Then there's Ellie, who is pretty much the whole reason you're playing this game. Ellie is the only known human who is immune to the Cordyceps fungus, but for her safety, only a few people know that. Joel ends up being tasked to smuggle her across the country to a facility where they'll attempt to figure out how she's immune, and use that to create a vaccine. He's initially reluctant to do so, but after some convincing, he decides to do it. Because of the trauma he experienced with his daughter, Joel is cold towards Ellie for a while, but throughout the game you get to see them develop one of the most adorable father-daughter relationships of all time. That's really the point of this game, to show that you can find something good even in such a broken world.
No matter what, you keep finding something to fight for.
Now that you know what this game's all about, I'm going to put the story on hold for a bit so I can talk about the gameplay. With everything I've said so far, it probably seems like this is actually just a movie, but that isn't the case at all. Playing this game for yourself immerses you even deeper into its world, and gives you a more personal attachment to Joel and Ellie's journey. It's a third-person shooter, similar to Uncharted, but it isn't as over-the-top as that game. Joel isn't as young and spry as Nathan Drake, and the gameplay reflects that. As IGN would say, this game really makes you feel like an old man. The camera is also placed right over Joel's shoulder, making the encounters feel more up close and personal. When you hit someone with a melee weapon, it really feels like you hit them with the intent to kill.
Man, you hit hard.
Well, I was trying to kill you.
This game also finally introduced some character progression that the Uncharted series was always lacking. You can scavenge areas for supplies such as supplements to upgrade Joel, and parts to upgrade your weapons. On top of that, you'll always need to be looking out for resources such as alcohol or wrap to craft with. The crafting system is very simple, but it's very effective at making you feel like you're always running low on resources. Several of the items use the same resources, so you'll always be making choices on what's most important to make at the time. This gives you much more of a reason to explore since you need resources to survive against the many dangers of this world. As mentioned earlier, there are many threats to worry about once you leave the quarantine zones. Let's start with the infected. Like I said earlier, the quote-unquote zombies in this game aren't actually undead like they traditionally are, but are instead infected with the Cordyceps fungus. As time passes, the fungus continually grows on its host, which means there are different stages of infection. First, we have the runners, who have only recently been infected and can still see you. Then we have the clickers, who have been infected long enough for the fungus to sprout out of their head and take their vision. Don't worry though, because these terrifying bastards can still see you through echolocation. Finally, we have the bloaters, which are currently the last known evolution of the fungus. These guys have been infected for so long that the fungus has developed armor plates to protect them. Luckily, you don't have to deal with them very often, but when you do, be prepared to use up all of your ammo. Aside from the various types of infected, you'll also be dealing with plenty of human threats. The humans need to be approached differently the infected do, since they have intelligence and guns. The smartest way to take humans out is through stealth, which is also something that has dramatically improved since Uncharted. Uncharted only ever had a couple of encounters that allowed you to utilize stealth, and even those were set up for you to do them in a specific way. The encounters in The Last of Us are a lot more varied, and have several unique ways to approach them. You can even revert back to stealth even if you got caught, as long as you're out of sight for a bit. The variety of enemy types and open design of the encounters makes each one of them feel unique and stand out in my mind. The only thing that could have made it better is if they would have had areas that mixed infected and humans, but that's more of a missed opportunity than a solid negative. By this point, I shouldn't even have to mention how beautifully detailed the environments are, but I feel I need to anyways because once again, Naughty Dog has outdone themselves. Not only are they stunning to look at, but they're also used as a way to blend the storytelling and gameplay. There are notes scattered throughout them that tell their own stories if you put out the effort to find them and piece them together. You could read a letter and then realize that it was written by the clicker you just killed before they were infected. Or maybe they'll give some insight on certain details within the area, like why it's abandoned. This world is always telling you a story, even outside of the cutscenes, which only further bridges the gap between gameplay and story. The Last of Us has already shown itself to be one of the most grounded and realistic gaming experiences out there, but if you want to get the most out of that, Grounded mode is something you should not miss out on. Grounded mode is the hardest difficulty available in the game. It wasn't even in the game at launch, but was later added as an additional challenge for people who wanted a reason to play the game again. In this difficulty, you truly have to make every shot count, and use your resources sparingly. The amount of supplies you'll find are extremely limited, to the point where even crafting something simple like a medkit is a huge decision to make. Joel also dies in only a couple of shots as a real person would. This is made even harder by the fact that Grounded also removes your entire HUD, which means you never know how much health you have. In addition to making the game harder, it also makes it even more immersive since there's absolutely nothing on your screen besides the actual game. In the regular game, you have an ability called Listen Mode that allows you to see the outlines of enemies through walls, and not surprisingly, Grounded takes that away too. This is the way the game was meant to be played in my opinion, and while it's extremely challenging, I'd recommend that any fan of the game try it out at some point. Along with the main game, The Last of Us offers a couple of bonus experiences that give you some great extra content to sink your teeth into. For a game that has such a clear focus on crafting an excellent single-player story, you probably wouldn't expect anything special as far as multiplayer is concerned. Most games would just tack on a mediocre multiplayer mode in an attempt to extend their game's lifespan, but the Factions multiplayer mode genuinely surprised me. Doing things like knocking down enemies, reviving teammates, or crafting items will reward you with parts. These parts are then brought back to your community after the match, and depending on how many you got, you can have a thriving and healthy community, or a sick and starving one. The game modes are played in teams, but your rewards are based solely on your performance, so you don't have to worry about being dragged down by bad teammates. That also means that you can't depend on anybody else to carry you, so you'll have to do your best at using what the single player taught you to succeed. This game also offered one single-player expansion called Left Behind that tells the story of Ellie and her childhood friend Riley. I don't have much to say about this since it's only about 2 or 3 hours long, but I will say that it's a great addition to the game that's full of adorable moments and gives even more depth to Ellie's character. Okay, I know I said a few episodes ago that I wouldn't hold back on spoiling for the rest of the Naughty Dog reviews, but The Last of Us is such a sacred experience to me that I can't risk ruining it for anybody. Because of that, I'm gonna be vague when talking about the ending. So towards the end of the game, Joel makes a choice that makes him even more of a morally gray character. Logically, his choice is the obvious wrong one, but humans don't always act logically, and I love that The Last of Us isn't afraid to show that. The game then ends without showing you the effect of those actions, and forces you to accept ambiguity. At the time, this was really hard to do because nobody knew whether or not there would ever be a sequel. It's really the most fitting way this game could have ended, considering the rest of its incredibly realistic themes. The Last of Us is a game that defined its generation. It proved that video game storytelling could match and even surpass that of any other medium. This game has so much to offer, especially considering it goes for only $20 on the PlayStation Store now. On the off chance you're somebody who hasn't played this game, I couldn't recommend more that you stop what you're doing and go play it. I give The Last of Us a 10 out of 10. Thank you so much to those of you who stuck around through the whole video. I know it was a little more serious than usual, but I couldn't help it. I'm just really passionate about this game. Anyways, if you enjoyed, I ask that you leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time when I talk about Uncharted 4.